it's interesting because he doesn't speak to actually about the burden of saying, okay, we need to remove those, but rather how we face those and the benefits of what it's like to live in that same kind of burden and yet live with the kind of margin or boundaries that Christ has designed, and how that can impact us and give us benefit. And so let me first focus a little bit on some signs of a life without margin, because I think it's important for us to really kind of see. It's easy to think, oh yeah, I need to have it, but never do anything. But looking at a little bit of what's going on in these people maybe helps us to see in our own life, are there signs that tell me that I don't either have appropriate margins in my life or none at all, and I'm really kind of living out in that splash zone, and I'm running a risk of crashing and burning at any time? One of the signs, I think, is a loss of intimacy in relationships. If you read through in other areas about the people, they're totally disconnected between the religious leaders, certainly between God, and they see God as more of a judgmental God, and there's no personal relationship that's going on or intimacy between them and God. They're also burdened, no doubt, because of the brokenness in relationship with others, because they are so carrying such burden of all the suppression that's going on that they just lack intimacy. And when we think about areas like in scheduling, in the business of a schedule, or even finances, or even in moral areas where we push the envelope, one of the first things to be impacted is our relationships. We can go and have a great schedule and even run together in the schedule, and yet if we're honest, we never stop to really get to know each other, to really share life together. It becomes more of a performance or a task or things that we do, and so our relationships, our intimacy suffers. So that's certainly a sign. If you feel like you're not close, you need to really step back and say, are we missing some margins here that we need in our life? Another one is a loss of purpose and direction. Jesus is describing here really trying to get people who are just really scattered. And even in other passages, Jesus talks about their sheep without a shepherd. They're just scattered. There's just no sense of direction. There's just a sense of loss and a sense of hopelessness. And these are the descriptions that are used to describe the people that Jesus has gone out and to reach to. They're just jumping through hoops. There's a new rule that's set by the religious leaders, and they got to obey it. And then there's another rule, and they got to obey it. And everybody's judging them based on that. It's kind of like a life where all you're doing is you're spinning these plates, and you're at a point where it's no longer really any kind of purpose or direction, but it's just trying to keep the things we got going. And we're paying attention more to what's starting to slip and fall, as opposed to where we really want to go and what are we really trying to accomplish, or what is our purpose in life. Kind of ties into that saying when we're talking about this margins, where I used to hear this a lot, and they were probably referring to me now that I look back when I was in real estate. The difference between when you work to live or whether you live to work. And sometimes we get to a point where we really are living to work. Work consumes us. And we've kind of lost that sense of direction or purpose. And so that's an area where we recognize that, there's some margin missing. A third sign, and I'm just giving you, there's others that you can look at, but I'm just kind of tying in a little bit in three areas. So here's a third sign, is this increase in stress and fatigue. Everything takes more work. Everything, even the simplest things, can sometimes just burden us and seem such a big deal. We're exhausted. We're stressed out. We're facing depression. All of these symptoms that kind of come from it. Because we feel emotionally that life just seems to, we're losing control, and life starts to be spinning out of control, and back to the plate spinning, we're trying to hold it back in, and that's the kind of life we live. And if we feel high level of stress and burden, it's a sign that we're really not living within the margins that maybe God has designed for us, that God promises us. And it ends up, we're in a dangerous area. We're kind of in the splash zone. I shouldn't use that, but it worked for me because it sounds so fun. But in life, it's not. It seems okay, well, I'll work on it tomorrow, until your life crashes. And it's too late. Now you got to pick up the pieces and you deal with the mess. And so Jesus is going to these people and saying, look at, and he's speaking to them and he's describing this sign of life, this benefit of a life that God has designed that is safe within these margins, that gives us all the things we really are longing for when we follow and we live for Him. And so let's look at that. Some of the things that Jesus described. Jesus replaces, first of all, he talks about replacing isolation with intimacy. He uses the very first words when he says to these people, come to me. It's an invitation by Jesus to say, look, I'm not this isn't a distant Father in heaven, a distant God. He talks about revealing Him to those I choose to reveal. This Father in heaven, this relationship of the God of the universe, the creator of it all, this God who loves us so much, who sounds distant to us. But Jesus invites us into intimacy by saying, no, come to me, all you who are weary. He gives an invitation for us into this intimacy and this relationship with Him. I should say that this is the story about the yoke. The yoke, obviously, the most common illustration is they think about the yoke of oxen, and maybe Jesus was seeing some oxen. That big bar that they have across the yoke. But honestly, there was really maybe even more common in that day was a yoke that servants wore and slaves wore, where you've seen them in other scenes where, they were often a servant or a slave was given way too much to carry or whatever. And so you would put a bar over his shoulder, and you've seen them where they hang them on both sides, and you can carry far more weight than physically you could carry with your hands, because you had this yoke across your shoulders that you would carry this weight. So no doubt in Jesus' day there could easily have been a woman carrying water, or a servant carrying wheat or other things that the owner would have for their owner that they're following. And Jesus could easily be referring to someone like that and saying, follow me, come to me, because my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And so Jesus describes in there then, this load that Jesus has, this idea that we come into a relationship with Him, much like a servant or even a slave would come, is that Jesus becomes our Lord, our Master in this relationship. But then He also replaces this idea of confusion with clarity, because He says in here, He goes on then to say, learn from me. He said, I will be your teacher. You don't have to sit and figure this out. I'll show you. He said again, the reason I read the passage earlier, because He says, I reveal it to you. I will show you what you need to know. Part of the burden of life is we're trying to figure things out. And the anxiousness that comes from that. And just imagine what it's like. Have you ever had it where, I do it with computers all the time until Jim Lauk shows up or someone like that, where I'm like, I can't figure this stupid thing out. And then he'll say, let me take care of it. I mean, it's just, that's a load off my mind. Because I know he can do it. So I just need if he says, okay, hit this button or do this or pull up the screen or whatever, okay. I have no idea where we're going, but he does. So I'm okay with that. And that's what's really being described here when Jesus says, come, to me, all who are weary, I will give you rest. Take my yoke. I mean, He's describing a relationship where you'll become a follower. I mean, throughout it talks Jesus saying you're a disciple. You're a follower of mine. And immediately by saying that, He's giving us a sense of direction and clarity in our life, where we know that we follow someone who knows where to go. We don't have to worry about that. We don't have to try to figure that out. We can just trust in Him to be able to guide us the right place and the right way. There's huge comfort in that, in knowing that He knows. And then the third thing that kind of ties in this idea is Jesus replaced this pressure with peace. As I said earlier, notice that in there He doesn't say, I will take your burdens away or anything like that. But rather what He says is, I will give you the means to carry those burdens and never give you too much. We have the peace of knowing that in any situation that we're in, that we have a God who is in control, who we are following, who always knows what we can handle, and will never give us too much.